Hello, and welcome to this political edition of Florida by the Numbers. I'm Alex Coelho, the Director of Data and Analytics here at the Florida Chamber of Commerce, here to talk about what we learned from last week's general election, who won, who lost, and what it means for Florida in the short and the long term. Starting at the top of the ticket, Florida saw for the first time in more than 3 decades a double-digit win in the presidential race. Donald Trump beating Kamala Harris by 13 points across the state of Florida, the largest margin in 36 years. Similarly, we saw Senator Rick Scott reelected with a double-digit margin over former Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. These wins, along with what we've seen in voter registration trends and in the 2022 general election, confirm Florida's political shift to the right nationally and within the state. Indeed, as we look through the 67 counties of Florida, Democrats won just 6 counties across the entire state in both the presidential and the Senate race. One of the key reasons for this is the continuing shift we see amongst the Hispanic population in Florida and indeed nationally toward Republicans. It was a key factor in a number of Donald Trump's wins across the country. And here in Florida, we see it most clearly in our 3 majority Hispanic counties, Miami-Dade, Osceola, and Hendry. Indeed, if we look at the last 8 years, in Miami-Dade County alone, from the 2016 presidential election, when Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump by 29 points in Miami-Dade County, to last week's election, where Donald Trump wins Miami-Dade County by more than 11 points, we see a net swing of 40 points in Miami-Dade County in just 8 years' time, something unprecedented for any county this size across the entire nation over this time period. It's indicative of the changing coalitions within the 2 major parties. As Democrats continue to perform relatively well, even in a bad election cycle, amongst suburban voters, but rural and urban voters swing heavily toward Republicans over this time. Looking at the other major statewide campaign of note this last week, that was the 2 constitutional amendments, specifically Amendment 3 on recreational marijuana and Amendment 4 on abortion rights. These 2 amendments combined saw over $250 million spent on their behalf. However, in the final vote tallies, both of these amendments failed to reach the 60% threshold required to be placed into Florida's Constitution, with Amendment 3 falling short at 56%, Amendment 4 at 57%. Despite these very similar statewide totals, the coalitions that ultimately defeated both of these amendments looked quite a bit different. Indeed, as we compare the Amendment 3 and Amendment 4 vote shares, we see that Amendment 4 on abortion rights did substantially better in many of Florida's urban counties. However, it did substantially worse amongst rural Floridians. For Amendment 3, when we look at the vote totals by county, we continue to see that rightward trend in Miami-Dade County and how it impacts Florida's politics. Taking just the counties where Amendment 3 failed to reach even 50% of the vote, we see a traditional Republican coalition of rural counties, some mid-sized traditionally Republican counties, and, quite surprisingly, Miami-Dade County, where the amendment failed with 51% opposition. So again here, we see that continued trend and how Miami-Dade's shift really does have a significant impact on Florida as a whole. Here at the Florida Chamber, we united the business community in opposition to Amendment 3. And as this amendment went up in smoke, we want to thank Governor DeSantis, First Lady Casey DeSantis, and the entire coalition that united to keep Amendment 3 out of Florida's Constitution. Looking further down ballot, Republicans continue to have a good night when we look at the Florida Senate and the Florida House. Now in the Florida Senate, because only half the seats are up each election cycle, the race really was about just 1 seat, right up here in Tallahassee, between Corey Simon, incumbent senator, and Darrell Parks, his Democratic challenger. This race saw millions of dollars spent, and if you live up here in Tallahassee, you probably saw 100,000 or 200,000 of each of their ads. Ultimately, Simon won this race quite handily, with an 11-point win over Darrell Parks, securing Republicans' continued 28-12 advantage within the Florida Senate. 2026 will see the other half of the Florida Senate, the even-numbered districts of our state, up on the ballot. Here, Democrats will have some opportunities to try to cut in to that 28-12 deficit. In the Florida House, Republicans did something they've never done before, not only winning a supermajority in 2022, but preserving that supermajority in the next election cycle. Indeed, the same 85-35 advantage that we saw in 2022 was replicated in the 2024 results. Democrats ultimately picked up just one seat, House District 45, down in southwestern Orange County. Republicans picked up in Palm Beach County in House District 93, as well as retaking House District 35 in Orange and Osceola counties, the seat that was notably won by Democrats in a special election at the beginning of this year. As Republicans maintain their supermajority for another 2 years, we begin to look at what the 2026 landscape will look like. Democrats will have some opportunities for sure. Indeed, there are 5 seats where Republicans won with between 50 and 51% of the vote. And so only a small shift would see Democrats have the opportunity to pick up these seats. On the other side, the continuing shifts in Florida politics see some unconventional seats suddenly in range for Republicans as they look toward 2026. In addition to the House District 45 seat they narrowly lost, additional seats in Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, and Hillsborough counties that are not typically considered battlegrounds suddenly look quite close as a result of shifting Hispanic voting patterns. How the next 2 years will play out remains to be seen, but both sides can begin planning for their next campaigns with a number of potential opportunities at stake. Here at the Florida Chamber, it was a successful night for the business community, as in 101 of the 103 endorsed races, Florida Chamber-backed candidates won their seats in the Florida legislature, ensuring a continued pro-business majority within both chambers. And we congratulate all of our winners on a successful campaign night. Well, the wheels of Florida politics keep turning. And on Monday night, 2 different announcements shook up the 2026 landscape across Florida. The first of these was that Congressman Mike Waltz of the 6th Congressional District in Northeast Florida has been tapped to be Donald Trump's national security advisor, a move that, upon his confirmation, would open up this congressional district to a special election. The district is heavily Republican, and there are a number of potential candidates who may seek their party's nomination in a special election in that district. Potentially even more consequential to the short and long term of Florida politics, though, is the opening of a U.S. Senate seat, as reports say that Senator Marco Rubio will be tapped to be Donald Trump's Secretary of State. Rubio's appointment would open up this Senate seat for Governor DeSantis to appoint a replacement. It would additionally put this seat onto the 2026 ballot in a special election to fill out the unexpired term. Florida is not lacking for potential Republican candidates for this seat, for sure. So there will certainly be a lot of different musical chairs over the next 2 years on this and the variety of other options going on across the statewide ballot. Because as we look to 2026, we see the governor, attorney general, and CFO, all term limited, opening up open races for all 3 of these seats, in addition to whatever happens with the U.S. Senate. So Florida politics really does never sleep. And so we at the Florida Chamber Political Operations Team will continue to be diligent in monitoring the latest developments across our vast state in the years to come. And as we continue to be diligent, we look to the future for recruiting and vetting the best candidates for the business community. Our Florida Institute for Political Leadership is finishing up its 2024 campaign training schools and will soon be announcing a 2025 list of campaign schools across the state. If you or someone you know is interested or would be a good candidate for office, please contact Andrew Wiggins to find out more about the Institute for Political Leadership. Additionally, our Florida Chamber Political Institute, the nonpartisan research arm of the Florida Chamber, will continue to vet the next generation of legislative candidates across the state. The success the Florida Chamber had this year in electing 101 pro-business candidates would not have been possible without the Political Institute's research and travels across the state, interviewing over 100 candidates in 5 locations around Florida, as well as tracking the latest trends and news in Florida politics. And if you'd like more information on our Political Institute, please contact Executive Director Marian Johnson. Florida just ended yet another very contentious and very expensive political cycle. And the price of politics in Florida never is going to go down, as Florida continues to grow as a state, and indeed, as we see from the Rubio and Walz appointments, from Donald Trump's victory, from the appointment of Susie Wiles to be Chief of Staff, Florida remains the epicenter of American politics now. If you'd like more information on how to keep Florida Florida and help our political operations team, please contact our Executive Director, Frank Walker. And for more information on this past week's elections, or questions about what these mean for Florida or for your region of the state, please feel free to contact me at my contact information here. Again, for the Florida Chamber, I'm Alex Coelho, thanking you for helping us to continue to secure Florida's future.